On behalf of Haga Cambodia and Haga International, I am Kosal, project manager from Haga Cambodia. I would like to say thank you very much for your attention on my presentation, and also I would like to say thank you for the organizer who gave me the opportunity to share what our practice and our implementation in Cambodia. And taking this, I would like to say thank you to Zoe who always supporting and connecting with us. Okay, so in my presentation, I would like to present the four sessions. For the first one, want to present about our vision and mission, and the second, we would to prefer to prepare for you our beneficiary, and the third one, we would prepare about our strategy and the working approach. So starting from this, we would like to say that in Haga we have our mission want to see all community are free from any kind of trauma, the trauma of from the human trafficking, modern slavery, and abuse. So we want to see all community are free from this and treated or healed. And our mission, we very happy to support directly to the affected people by trauma. So we hope we our expert on our skill can help those community people to heal from the trauma, and we believe that healing happen, the cycle of trauma stop. So in our core value, we focusing on this acronym of RISE. The RISE is from respect, integrity, compassion, and excellence. That is our way of working. So the question: who are our beneficiaries? Our beneficiaries is of the group of the women and the children, and especially everyone have been aware that we been aware that every people's every countries developing country in around the world, women and children are the group of the vulnerable group. So for Hagar Cambodia, we focusing on the women and children who are the victim or the survivor from trauma, and the trauma from the root cause of modern slavery, human trafficking, exploitation, and abuse. So all those people are our beneficiaries. And in terms of strategy, we have five strategies in Haga. The first one is focusing on the whole journey for heal. We call heal, mean that when they started, they had a problem. So when they close it, they have no problem, and also they are stable of their economy and stable of their emotion as well. So we support directly to the survivors, especially for girls and women, and to heal from the traumas, and they are able to access to the social service. So social service is focusing on everything that physical and emotional support to make sure that they are feeling their trauma not re-traumatized and not happen again after recoveries. So in this time, we focusing on 2 points. First point, we focusing on capacity building to our staff and our partner to be able to provide a service. And the second one, we build strengthen our network and service provider together to work for community and the people. And another point, we try to scaling up what our good practice and our implementations. And the second strategy, we're focusing on the prevention. So in the prevention stage, we make sure that modern slavery, human trafficking, or exploitation and abuse for to vulnerable in the area will be sanctioned by the mechanism in place. And also this, we have two focusing points. One is to try to understand the impact of the current prevention activity. And then second one, we try to learn and develop about just how to make the low cost of the awareness to make sure that prevention work are proper implemented. And strategy three, we're focusing on partnership. So this is very important for everywhere that we work as networking and partners, because we have to build trust and have to have a good connection with our partner in order to make sure they are able to provide a service to the which team and to that survivor. So The second point, you try to learn from this and to make sure that we have the one of the manual and role model to the staff, including to our partner, to make they effective to become a very good trainer in the communities. And another point here, strategy four, we focus on empowerment. So empowerment here, it is kind of the good way to make our community people or survivor the able to contribute to that society and economies income. So this is we build their capacity to make like a small business or something like that, and also we try to learn from them to scaling up our program. And the last strategy, we focus on influencing. Influencing is very important way to make the policy change, or we increase the opportunity for the people, for the communities, and also building more strategy for the communication and make change in the policy making. That is very important point. And the third part, we focus on our program. We have the several program in Haga, Cambodia, like we have case management, we have counseling, we have legal support, we have the economic empowering projects, we have the family support. For example, this is the very good point that we direct supported the family during the COVID-19. So all family who are beneficiaries are receiving our direct support at this hard time. And the last, another point is in reintegration program. This is the whole journey of the client as well. And staff care, this is the last our program that we are focusing on. And the last point is very important. We say a working approach. This is very important that we have the middle of the survivor, and also we have to work with the community and family, and we have to work with another projects like we call community-based care activity from our Hanga Cambodia. And also we work with another developing partner and service provider networks. And the last point, we're working with local authority. They are the one of to make sure all policy are changing from this. So all these together are the linkage. Linkage means that from perspective of the developing partner, they have their own program, they have their own activity, and but they have to allocate some to make sure that the social service that I mentioned in the beginning will be provided for the survivors. And recently, we have the three-man network. We have the three-man layer on network. We have at the sub-national level. We're focusing on community network. We have provincial network, and we have national network. The all network will bring voice from community to be heard at the national level and policy making. So this is the influencing work. And family and community are the most important because that they are close to the survivor, and also they are the one who can look after the survivor on time when they need it. So based on our experience, this family and community are the main body in the community development for the surviving all the survivor from the trauma. So family are the part who can help and who can support us on time. The last part is local authority. So local authority is one of the second parent or second father and mother who look after the survivor, community, and families. So local authority are running very important role in our projects, and we encourage them come together to make sure that survivors are happy to live in these communities. Okay, please, any question, because we have this story at some point can help you about human trafficking in Cambodia as well. Thank you.
And welcome, and thank you so much, Kosal, for your fantastic presentation. So my name is Zoe, and I'd just like to start with a bit of information about me, just to provide some context for this session. I came to Hagar, Cambodia 4.5 years ago, where I did a small piece of research looking at their trauma-informed model they were using in the school. And during that time, I met with many social workers and teachers and clinicians at Hagar, and some of them shared these remarkable stories of their former clients who had gone on to create these amazing lives for themselves and get degrees and get married and create families of their own. And I am a trauma therapist, so I became very curious as to how this was occurring. And that essentially formed the basis of my PhD. Now, I'm not going to go into too much details about the research itself, given the time constraints of this presentation, but please feel free to ask me more in the Q&A. What I wanted to share with you today instead was very much around what some of those themes that emerged and some of the findings that, at least I think, are very interesting, and what we can learn from Hagar's young people, many of whom have left Hagar 10, 15 years ago, which means that they have had the ability to really reflect on their lives. I used qualitative interviewing and also a narrative timeline of events, which was a really useful tool for them as well to explore and also identify themselves some of those factors that I'll be talking to you today. Starting with hope and meaning making. This emerged very early on in the piece. So my first participant that I interviewed said to me that without all of the bad things that had happened in his early childhood, he would not be where he is today. And he is a psychologist today, working with children. And this was something that was very prevalent in a large portion of the former clients of Hagar, many of whom were working in boarding houses for young women or as in leadership or mentoring roles for young people. And it seemed to appear that there was this cyclical process of trauma events, of recovery, of opportunity, and then making sense of what had happened by being of service and essentially doing good for other people. Many of whom had faced a lot of stigma as well at times in their life. A large density of the Hagar participants that I spoke to in my research were orphans without any kinship families. And the reason there is a frog on that slide here is one of them said to me, or one of my participants said at one point, "Zoe, did you know that frogs can only move forward?" And I said, I wasn't aware of that. And they said, yes, a frog is physically incapable of moving backwards. They can only jump forward. So I'm like a frog. It's one of my favourite quotes. There are many. But looking now towards, and this is what I would really want to focus on, first of all, individualistic. So when there has been a lack of immediate family or supports, kinship, Hagar has foster families, and they come up in the data a lot. So these young people talk about the significance of being loved by a family, of a sense of belonging that they have experienced, and that they were loved like a real son. And the majority of them continue to go back into the provinces for Khmer New Year, for example, to spend time with their foster families or their real families. But all of them had a significant adult who they were either later, for example, trafficked, or their mother was murdered, or there were lots of stories that started from age 3 onwards. And so there was a time period of trauma. Some of them that lost their only living relative, which was a grandparent, for example, had found themselves living on the street and fending for themselves. And that was part of the survival strategies that were learnt by many of these young people, to rely on others in their peer group. As one participant said, I had 2 friends. They were the closest friends I've ever had, and they helped me survive, and they helped me steal well. And it was around food and survival. for that young person. And so when there's been support from the family or the kinship scenario, some have had really positive experiences with that and felt love and felt support, and that has enabled them to put the pieces back together and to explore opportunities. What I mean by opportunities as well is this has entered the NGOs or Hagar, and for example, whether it's education or skills or some kind of opportunity that enables them to create a sense of purpose and meaning and direction in their life. Many of them spoke about a significant other. And that other person, and I'm going to give some examples to highlight what I mean by this. In one instance, a young woman that I interviewed, very good English, sat down and told me a story for about 40 minutes with almost no prompts from me whatsoever, very proficient in English. And she said when she finished Year 12, she did well, but she did Year 12 in the provinces, and there were scholarships available, but her English wasn't very good. But she decided that she wanted to do a degree in English literature. And I said to her, that must have been really hard for you. And she said, well, yes, I hated it, but I did it because my counsellor at Hagar told me I could do anything I wanted. And in another example, a young man who had a lot of behavioural issues after his trauma was about to be expelled at school, and there was a Brazilian teacher who was only in his life for about a 6-month period who fought really hard for him to stay in school, and as a result, this man is now a doctor. So many of them had one adult, and there was a message, I believe in you, you can do this, and that was felt by these young people. Following on from that, and I think I would be amiss not to mention the expressions of trauma, as I'm calling it. It's not to suggest that life is now a bed of roses for many of these young people. They have faced continual challenges throughout their lives in terms of stigma, but also many of them self-reported an inability to handle emotions well. Some of them talked a lot about anger management. Many of them had found tools, often faith-based, that they were helping to alleviate some of those symptoms. I say symptoms as in the anger management, and many of them experienced they have a distinct lack of trust of others, and especially some of the women. In one example, this young woman feels she lives on her own, which is very unusual for a Cambodian woman, and she said that sometimes she feels so angry that she breaks her furniture. And she made a joke out of it and said she had to always buy new furniture. But it was more that it's not that this controlled and dictated her life. She has gone on to have 2 degrees and runs a successful business, but these expressions of her early childhood trauma is still coming out in various ways, and that was across the group. But some of those factors that really enabled their recovery was to make sense of it in this cyclical process. A lot of them were leaders and mentors and working at boarding houses or working with children in the slums, and it was around I can take these awful things that happen to me and help others with what I know. And that was really powerful, and that cut across both groups. The term wounded healers comes from Jung, and it was originally for psychotherapists, but one could argue that the NGO world and certainly the psychologists, doctors, teachers, healers, all of these people that are helping and supporting are sometimes, and especially in Cambodia where there's so much intergenerational trauma, they themselves wounded healers. And that was something that was really present in a lot of the cohort of Hagar. So I'm just going to close also with a Jung comment. I'm not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. So thank you all so much for listening.